Our next keynote, titled Future of Assessment and Learning, will be presented by our wonderful Dr. Ben Smith, Regional Director, Southeast Asia and Pacific, Cambridge Assessment International Education, Singapore. Dr. Ben Smith was named Regional Director for Southeast Asia and Pacific in 2012. He is a trained lawyer with a doctorate in philosophy and a master's degree in education. Based in Singapore, he leads the team that is responsible for driving the organization's growth and supporting schools, governments across the region in the adoption of Cambridge International Programs and Qualifications. I present you now to Dr. Ben Smith.
Thank you very much, David, for your wonderful introduction, and good morning to everybody. I'm asked to speak about the future of learning in the context of this digital odyssey. So here's a prediction about the future of learning and technology. It was made in 1923 by Thomas Alva Edison, one of the world's greatest engineers and inventors. This is what he said: the children of today, speaking in 1923, will get their education at schools in which the movie screen will supplant the blackboard and the motion picture film will take the place of textbooks. I think it is fair to say that this EdTech future predicted by Edison almost 100 years ago has been a bit slow to materialize. In many ways, the history of technology's impact in the classroom has been a history of failed predictions and revolutions that never came. There's been more than a century of EdTech innovation since Edison's time, and yet, when it comes to the fundamentals of teaching and learning, technology use in the classroom, by and large, has not resulted in any real substantial transformation of what we do. However, in a different and more indirect way, technology has indeed changed education quite considerably. Historically, advances in technology, in science, and industry, which meant steps towards a greater rationalization of the world, have also resulted in counter movements that emphasized a more holistic, more intuitive, and more romantic vision of the world. And these two strands of the modern mindset, rationalism and romanticism, have been intertwined like the double helix of a DNA. Rationalism in education has developed national curricula and standardized assessments. It has given us education for all with measurable outcomes. It has been proud to produce the workforce of the future, capable of leading and serving the progress of science, civics, and enterprise. Romanticism in education, on the other hand, has influenced the reform pedagogy of educators like Rousseau, Steiner, Montessori, or Kurt Hahn. It speaks of a different vision, where we listen to the needs and dreams of children, where we reunite them with their feelings, with their bodies, and with Mother Nature, where we hope to grow rounded individuals who will find purpose and happiness in their lives. So thus, we now stand, I believe, at a threshold moment where two developments converge, come together to shape the future of learning. One is the direct impact that technology will have through its use in the learning process. And two, the more indirect impact of technology on education, which I believe may be even bigger. Why do I feel that after more than a century of revolutions that never came, EdTech will now finally begin to effect real change? That is because I see three things coming together. Number one, increased computing power. Two, the availability of big data. And three, advances in artificial intelligence. Together, these three create a threshold moment where the use of technology in the learning process itself can, in the future, change more fundamentally than it has done in the past what we do as teachers and educators. And what do I mean by the indirect impact of technology on the future of learning? I mean that the supremacy of technology in the last 200 years, together with its cousins, the rationalist mindset, an industrial mode of production, and a capitalist economy, has brought us to a crisis point. It has become clear that aiming for infinite growth in a finite world is madness and a recipe for disaster. But if past history is any guide, that crisis point will call forth a counter movement. It will call forth cultural advances that will stem more from the romantic and holistic mindset. And in my view, if and when that happens, it will have the potential to change the way we educate our children well beyond the use of even the most advanced technologies for learning. So that's the big picture. In the rest of my talk, instead of predictions, I will offer a series of stories. Taken together, these stories will show the kinds of choices that we all will need to make about the way we use and respond to technology in education. These choices, I will show, lead to 4 different scenarios, 4 different futures of learning. Let's begin with the first. More than 20 years ago, in 1999, a group of children in the Calcutta slums of New Delhi, one morning, found a hole in the wall where none had been before. Inside that hole was a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, nothing else. It was a computer connected to the internet behind a plastic shield. In a hole in the wall that separated the slum where the children lived from the campus of a software company on the other side called NIIT. So on the other side of that wall was the person who had put the computer there. He was a 26-year-old physics student by the name of Sugata Mitra, who just happened to work on that campus. So out of curiosity, he set up a computer and internet connection on the NIIT side, backstage, so to speak, while the monitor, keyboard, and mouse faced an unknown audience on the other side of the wall in the slum. One morning, he simply opened the hole, powered the whole thing up, and left for work. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, there was a bunch of street kids from the slum with time on their hands. To be honest, when Sugata came back in the evening, he fully expected the PC to be smashed, opened up, and sold for parts. What he actually found was a group of children earnestly working on the computer. Street children who had never touched a computer before in their lives, browsing the internet in English, a language that they did not speak. So in the months to come, children all over India would have that same experience. One morning, they would find a hole in the wall near where they lived. Inside the hole, a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse. Nothing else. No explanations, no adults, nothing. All of these children, although previously unfamiliar with computers, quickly learned to operate them by themselves without adult intervention and taught themselves English in the process. From these experiments, Sugata Mitra proposed the hypothesis of what he called minimally invasive education. He writes, the acquisition of basic computing skills by any set of children can be achieved through incidental learning, provided the learners are given access to a suitable computing facility with entertaining and motivating content and some minimal human guidance. One viral TED Talk and $1 million prize money later, Mitra started work on building what he then called a school in the cloud. The idea was that groups of children would self-learn in interaction with computers and the internet. Mitra did concede that humans were still required. Not for teaching, though, in the usual sense, but for emotional support. So he recruited an army of retired teachers who connected to the children via Skype. He called them the Granny Cloud. Let us set aside what conclusions we can or cannot draw from this experiment. Let us appreciate it just as a story. Because as a story, it turned out to be extraordinarily successful. In 2013, Mitra's talk about the hole in the wall experiments was seen millions of times and won the prestigious TED Award. So there was something here that struck a nerve. What fascinated people was not so much the experiment itself, it was the story that captured the public imagination, because it seemed to tell us something about the future of learning, or at least about one possible future of learning. So this is our first scenario, the school in the cloud. In its purest form, this story is the story of a world in which children learn through interaction with computers and with each other. Mitra's succinct formula was broadband plus collaboration equals learning. And that meant once the basic hardware and the parameters were set up, human adults, teachers, were largely optional, except for the granny cloud, perhaps, which functioned a bit like a plug-in for emotional support. So this scenario is school in the cloud with the grannies as an optional extra. The school in the cloud story reflects one kind of choice that we can make, but it is not the only one. Here's another story that happened almost 20 years after the first children's computer appeared in that hole in the wall between the slum and the software campus in Delhi. This story involved my two nieces, who were both 10 years at the time, living in a nice green university town in the southwest of Germany, where I'm from. During their long summer vacation, for more than 3 weeks every morning, they would board a bus at the crack of dawn and escape to a place in a nearby forest called the Bird's Nest. There they would live in the forest the whole day long, together with a bunch of other kids their age. They were mentored by slightly older kids and guided by a few adults who oversaw the whole camp. The children would cook their food over wood fire in a makeshift kitchen shelter. They would sing songs and explore the forest. They would get dirty in the mud, clean up in the river, then come together around the campfire and tell their stories. The Bird's Nest had everything. They had cooking and singing, art and science, joy and sorrow, adventure and bonding, you name it. What it did not have was mobile phones, or computers, or even TV or radio. I think there may have been a couple of light bulbs in one of the wooden shelters, but that was about the extent of technology used. And my two nieces were happy, really happy. This tradition of the Bird's Nest has been around for more than 50 years. It continues because almost everybody who experienced it once wants to come back and continue to be part of it, because it's an unforgettable experience, full of life and learning. And the Bird's Nest is not alone. It is part of a tradition of forest schools or open air schools that trace their history back for more than 100 years. Some of them operate year-round, offering full-time comprehensive education to their students. In recent years, this concept has gained renewed traction, especially since the publication in 2008 of a book called Last Child in the Woods. It was written by the American journalist Richard Lowe out of a deep concern that, as he said, our society is teaching young people to avoid direct experience in nature. The subtitle of the book is Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. What Lowe means is that as we modernize and urbanize, our children tend to retreat into indoor pursuits and virtual worlds, and they become increasingly alienated from their natural surroundings. And with that alienation from nature, he believes, comes alienation from ourselves and our communities. So instead, Lowe says, education should be based on a reunion of children with nature. Because in this telling of the story, nature is not only our teacher, but also our healer. A healer in particular of the pervasive anxieties, depressions, and other mood disorders that have become so pandemic in our post-industrial world. So this then is our second scenario. Instead of the school in the cloud, we have the school in the forest. In its purest form, this story is a story where children learn by being together in natural surroundings. Nature becomes their prime teacher and healer under the guidance and support of sympathetic adults. In this scenario, digital technology is not completely ignored, but it is heavily compartmentalized. It is given its time and place, but only in a certain niche. And it must not be allowed to interfere with the greater purpose, which is reunion with nature and community. So now we have two scenarios that mark perhaps somewhat opposing points on a spectrum of possibilities, the school in the cloud and the school in the forest. And if you pay attention, you will encounter versions of that choice, cloud or forest, in so many different ways in your life as an educator or parent, small and large. And you will find your own answers, as we all do, as we seek to shape the future of education together, cloud or forest. So now in the second half of my talk, it's about filling in a bit more nuance between these two starkly contrasting scenarios. And for that, I want to start by introducing a new story with a new perspective. In the 1970s, a talented young boy from Taiwan moved to the United States with his parents. A few years later, he went on to study computer science at some of the most prestigious American universities. This was at a time when artificial intelligence began to emerge from being merely the niche interest of a few academic geeks and increasingly turned into the obsession of C-suite executives in boardrooms across Silicon Valley. Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, for that is his name, soon rose to executive positions at Microsoft, SGI, and Apple in the United States. Then he became president of Google in China and ultimately founded an investment firm called Sinovation Ventures that now focuses on developing the next generation of Chinese high-tech companies. Listen to the story that this man has to tell about our future of living with artificial intelligence. The AI world order, artificial intelligence world order, will combine winner-takes-all economies with an unprecedented concentration of wealth in the hands of a few companies in China and the United States. This, I believe, is the real underlying threat posed by artificial intelligence. Tremendous social disorder and political collapse stemming from widespread unemployment and gaping inequality. Tumult in job markets and turmoil across societies will occur against the backdrop of a far more personal and human crisis, a psychological loss of one's purpose. Where in this bleak picture of the AI world order are we as teachers and educators? Dr. Kai-Fu Lee's story follows the pattern of a science fiction novel where Earth is invaded by an alien race, except here it's not aliens, but artificial intelligence. So let's listen as Kai-Fu Lee sets up this encounter between the two antagonists of the story, humans versus artificial intelligence, by comparing their relative strengths and weaknesses. He writes, while AI has far surpassed humans at narrow tasks that can be optimized based on data, it remains stubbornly unable to interact naturally with people or imitate the dexterity of our fingers and limbs. It also cannot engage in cross-domain thinking on creative tasks or ones requiring complex strategy, jobs whose inputs and outcomes are not so easily quantified. In other words, AI is super good at tasks that can be optimized based on data, while humans are super good at tasks that require social interaction and complex creative or strategic thinking. And that means jobs that can be optimized based on data and that do not require a lot of complex social interaction are at high risk of being replaced by AI in the future. Examples include telemarketers, basic translators, insurance adjusters, customer service reps, radiologists, etc. They are all in the danger zone. Conversely, jobs that are highly social, that require creative and strategic thinking, are fairly safe from AI competition. Examples include psychiatrists, social workers, PR directors, criminal defense attorneys, or chief executives. They are all in the safe zone. What about teachers? Teachers, it turns out, fall into a third category in between. It comprises jobs that are highly social, but that can also be optimized based on data. Other than teachers, we also find in this category the likes of tour guides, bartenders, medical caregivers, and financial or wedding planners. And Kai-Fu Lee describes that for these kinds of jobs, behind the scenes optimization work is overtaken by machines, while human workers will act as the social interface for customers. That is why he calls this category human veneer, meaning to say that humans are responsible merely for the veneer or the surface aspect of the interaction, the social interface, while the real work is done by machines in the background. One of the early examples in education of this trend was perhaps Bridge International Academies. In 2007, they started running private low-cost schools in Kenya. For $5 a month, a child would get to attend private school in a simple shed constructed of sheet metal and rough timbers with wooden desks facing a blackboard and no electricity. But appearances were deceptive. What the children would experience was determined by a highly structured, technology-driven model. Their teachers would follow standardized lesson scripts that they read out from handheld tablet computers. Their principals would run the school administration on their smartphones from another city. Their every move would produce streams of data for the artificial intelligence engines to analyze and assess in order to dictate the next moves of their teachers, giving them the scripts and principles. So that is a third scenario, neither school in the cloud nor school in the forest. Let's call it the human veneer school. In its purest form, this is a story of children apparently learning from teachers, but in reality following a script that has been produced by an artificial intelligence engine. Human teachers function merely as the social interface for the customers, while the real work of education behind the scenes is overtaken by machines in the background. So now we've got three scenarios, and I need to add a bit more color and detail to this emerging picture. You heard that I'm part of Cambridge International, which is the world's largest provider of international education programs for children of primary and secondary school age. I could tell you what digitalization means in our work. I could tell you how we as Cambridge have progressively switched the marking of exam scripts from paper to online, how increasing numbers of our learning resources are produced in a digital format, how we have exponentially grown our online formats for training of teachers, how we already offer screen-based and self-adaptive formative assessments, how we're working on secure versions of high-stakes online exams such as IGCSE and ASA levels, etc., etc. But more instructive, I believe, for thinking about the future of learning is perhaps what happens more on the periphery of the Cambridge universe. So I'm going to share with you the stories of three different entrepreneurs who are growing edtech startup companies that are linked to the Cambridge system. And from them, you will see how a fourth and final scenario for the future of learning begins to emerge. One that is at its core about reconfiguring the relationship between humans and technology and education. The first one is an English gentleman by the name of Dhruv Patel, who 25 years ago started his company Nisai with the vision to help students overcome barriers to learning using online education. They developed online courses for children with needs that were difficult to meet in mainstream schools in the UK. Children with mental health issues, children of refugees with little English, children who had cancer or other illnesses and were unable to attend regular school. Under the Nisai model, lessons were delivered online by teachers based in the company's headquarters in the north of England. All the while, the children were also part of their respective physical schools, part of a community of human beings in real life. A few years ago, Nisai began to take their model beyond the UK. So, for example, in Vietnam, most of the international schools are located either in Hanoi or in Ho Chi Minh City, which means there are children in between who also want to study international education but have no access. Some of these children have now begun to take Cambridge courses online, delivered by Nisai teachers after their regular school hours. They can also visit physical learning centers nearby that are run by Nisai in collaboration with local partners. Children will find there a quiet place to study with a good broadband connection, and also adults who will supervise and support them run social and cultural activities. So that is one way of looking at this kind of hybrid approach, where we find new configurations between the physical and the virtual, the human and the machine. NISA's vision is rooted in helping children overcome barriers to learning, and they want to do so by blending online delivery formats with real-world human-to-human communities. The story of the second entrepreneur begins when he was a boy in India studying Cambridge IGCSE and A-levels at school. Upon graduation, he got a place at the prestigious National University Singapore, where he and his co-researchers at the Artificial Intelligence Unit wrote a paper with the promising title, A Framework for Automated Generation of Questions Across Formal Domains. His name was Shubham Goyal, and the company is called Cerebri. His team developed an AI engine that delivers personalized learning. They started by training it on the rules and constraints of mathematics as defined in the Cambridge International Curriculum. And Cerebri claims that they have developed the world's first completely automatic question generator. It's an artificial intelligence framework that can create exam-style questions and solutions in any format, in any well-defined domain. It does not require a preset database of existing questions. All questions are 100% original and can be generated in seconds. They're customizable in terms of difficulty, format, and concepts tested. Cerebri have already demonstrated this in mathematics, physics, and chemistry, but they say the algorithm can easily adapt to other rule-based domains, whether it's biology, grammar, or finance. That program is now used in 780 schools across Southeast Asia, where it has often replaced textbooks. It creates questions in real time and adapts them to each individual student's learning needs as they evolve over time. It analyzes students' misunderstandings in areas of weaknesses. It provides immediate feedback, and it even begins to offer additional explanations and scaffolding where they went wrong. So this is another version of the hybrid school story, where the relationship between physical and virtual, human and machine is reconfigured. Large elements of the assessment process are automated, from question generation to auto marking to personalized student feedback to remedial learning offers. In this story, parts of the learning process are taken on by an artificial intelligence engine, which, as Kai-Fu Lee pointed out, is very good at tasks that can be optimized based on data. But what about the humans in this story? Will the teachers again act as human veneer, as the social interface merely, reading out lesson scripts produced and distributed by algorithms? Or is there perhaps a different, a deeper role for humans when artificial intelligence begins to teach our children? So perhaps we need to think of these hybrid schools as schools where a child might have two types of teachers, one a human and one an artificial intelligence engine. Which leads me to the third and final entrepreneur in my series, who's actually working on exactly that concept. His name is Benson Song. He's a Singaporean entrepreneur with an undergraduate degree in computer science and a PhD in education. His edtech startup is modestly described as the combination of an academic delivery platform with comprehensive interactive content for Cambridge programs. But what it really tries to do is develop a new way for human teachers and digital AI teachers to work together. Tellingly, the company and its product is called My Second Teacher, meaning to say that the AI teacher comes second to and supports the human teacher. How does that work? Many of you will know the flipped classroom approach. In brief, teachers assign students work to do at home in preparation for a lesson rather than as consolidation after the lesson. My Second Teacher takes this to a new level. Students are first introduced to new concepts through interactive videos that are interspersed with quizzes. If the answers are incorrect, the videos branch off so that any misunderstandings or insufficient mastery can be remedied on the spot before proceeding in the material. Then, with a brief formative assessment at the end of the unit, The artificial intelligence engine will give teachers detailed information about the engagement and mastery reached by the cohort and by individual students, as well as any specific misunderstandings that need to be addressed, and all this before anyone has set foot in the classroom. The idea is that this form of prior teaching and assessment, through the combination of digital interactive content with an AI engine, will provide valuable insights and free up time for the human teachers to do what they can do best. And that is deepen the engagement and mastery of their students, clarify conceptual misunderstandings, connect, importantly, the curriculum content with the real world, and most importantly, relate to their students as full human beings with bodies and emotions, as children with hopes, dreams, and desires. So these stories of three entrepreneurs in the wider Cambridge universe, Dhruv Patel with Nisai, Shubham Gopal with Fairbury, and Benson Sung with My Second Teacher, give us a flavor perhaps of a fourth scenario for a possible future of learning. First, I talked about the school in the cloud scenario, where children learn from interaction with machines with minimal intervention by adults, unless perhaps through the granny cloud for emotional support. Second, I told you about the forest school, where children learn from interaction with nature under the tutelage of older peers and the guidance of competent adults, with only a minimum of technology. Third, I outlined the human veneer scenario, where teachers act as the social interface for the customer, delivering lessons, scripts that are dictated by algorithms in schools that are managed remotely from smartphones. They provide the human veneer to an operation that is at its core driven by an artificial intelligence engine. And fourth, we now looked at three education entrepreneurs who all seek to reconfigure the relationship between physical and virtual, human and machine in different ways. Nisai by providing online education that complements the physical community of the student. Cerebri by delegating core assessment tasks to an artificial intelligence engine. And My Second Teacher by combining interactive digital content with smart algorithms to create a second AI-based teacher that helps and supports the human teachers to do what only they can do. And my name for this last approach is the School of the Centaur, because a centaur is a mythic creature with the upper body of a man and the lower body of a horse. Like a centaur, combining the qualities of a human with those of a horse, this fourth scenario is about combining the physical and the digital, human and AI into one functioning entity, a contemporary centaur, guided by the human spirit as the upper body and powered by AI as the lower body. And it turns out there's another reason why the centaur is such a suitable metaphor here when we're talking about the Digital Odyssey. In the story of the Odyssey, the hero Odysseus had a great teacher who was also renowned as a great healer. His name was Chiron, and he was a centaur, half man, half horse. So to conclude, school in the cloud, forest school, human veneer school, and school of the centaur. 4 different scenarios, 4 futures of learning. Which one do you find most likely to emerge? Which one would you choose for yourself or your children? Maybe all of them or none of the above. I do not know. But what I do know is this: the future of learning is not predetermined. We have some choices to make. I wish us all good luck as we embark on the Digital Odyssey. Thank you.